It is 2014, and you should be proud of your city for lots of reasons. And it is typical at the beginning that I go through a list of some of the recognitions and acknowledgments that we've gotten from members of the media throughout the country. But literally, if we did that this year, we would be here all afternoon. So instead of talking about all the accolades, I thought I would just list 5 that seem to have the most relevance about where we've been and where we are and where we're going in the next few years. Several of the media who are listing cities and trying to make recognitions are touting our successes and attributing it to our economy. The Atlantic magazine named us one of the most popular cities for millennials. And it's no wonder we're creating jobs, lots of jobs. And Atlantic points out we've also had one of the highest increases in wages of any metro in the country. It was said in 2013 that we were a place that you must visit. We were acknowledged for having a low cost of living. People noted we were strong in entrepreneurship. We were noted for being a brainy city. And we've always known we needed to work on our health, but in 2013, we again showed up on the list of the fittest cities in the country. Our housing market is strong. Out of 350 metro areas, we rank 3rd in how we've responded, and the Daily Beast looked around the country for cities that offered the most opportunity. They ranked us 4th in the country, having the most opportunity for your citizens to succeed. Young people were told to move here. Retirees were told to move here, and it looks like they are. Our population growth is very impressive. And I could go on, but I want to finish with a ranking that made all of us here at City Hall smile. In 2013, it was determined by the American Water Works Association that we had the best tasting tap water in the United States. Lift up your glass and we'll toast the water department here. That is the best tasting tap water. This city has come a long way, and I thought I would spend a few minutes looking back because it is sometimes amazing the breathtaking pace at which the city has come from where it was to where it is. 30 years ago, our economy had cratered. The price of oil dropped dramatically. Our energy jobs disappeared. Our banking system fell apart. In the 1980s, over 100 banks failed in our state. Our real estate values plummeted. In 1987, voters elected Ron Norick as Oklahoma City's new mayor, and Mayor Norick immediately announced that his top priority was to create jobs. But how do you do that? I mean, that's not easy to do. So in 1991, 4 years into his term, Mayor Norick was still searching for that magic formula about creating jobs. And that's when he and state leaders spent over a year chasing an economic development opportunity that was being offered by United Airlines. You see, United was going to build a large maintenance facility. News reports at the time said it was worth $1 billion to the community that could land the effort. It was going to employ more than 5,000 people, and over 100 cities were competing for it. We wanted it bad. Mayor Norick went to the citizens of Oklahoma City. He asked them to pass a temporary sales tax to help United build the facility. That's right. If United would come, we would help build the facility with our tax dollars. The total incentive package, state and city, in 1991 dollars was over $100 million. In the end, we didn't get it. It was embarrassing. Our business leaders, our government leaders had become confident that with this kind of incentive package, United would have to say yes. That they didn't. And when Mayor Norick pushed for an explanation, the CEO of United was reluctant to talk about the process. Instead, he wanted to be positive, and he complimented the city on how well prepared we were. and how polite the people of Oklahoma City were throughout the process. But Mayor Norick persisted. He wanted to know. He wanted to know why we lost out, because maybe we could learn from our mistake and maybe do better the next time we had an economic development opportunity come along. And finally, his persistence paid off. The CEO of United explained why Oklahoma City had finished second. You see, in conducting their due diligence, unbeknownst to the people of Oklahoma City, United had sent in a handful of mid-level executives and their spouses to spend a weekend in Oklahoma City and look around a little bit. And when they reported back, United gathered the information and concluded they were not going to consider Oklahoma City because they couldn't imagine their employees living here. That was the hard truth that the mayor and the city leadership needed to hear. Some sort of light bulb went off following that conversation. You see, we realized at that point that the world of economic development was changing. The old paradigm was that people moved to where the jobs were. The new paradigm was that people were moving to where they wanted to live, and the jobs were going to the cities that were attracting people. So the mayor and the business community got together. They started examining the city from an outside perspective. They started looking what we had to offer. And they started to compile a list of projects that would improve the quality of life in Oklahoma City. And it became known as MAPS, Metropolitan Area Projects. 9 projects in all. Most notably, you'll recall the ballpark, the sports arena, the canal, a badly needed update to the Civic Center Music Hall, a new downtown library. The mayor even had the audacity to believe that we should put water in the river. You see, the river used to have water in it. 100 years ago, it had lots of water. And after a heavy rain, it would flood the downtown area. And you can imagine that's quite an inconvenience for a growing city. So in the 1920s, our city leadership went to the Corps of Engineers and asked them to make sure the river would never flood again. They did. They took all the water out of the river. So for decades, we had a river that the grown-ups called a river, but really it was just a big ditch that we mowed twice a year. But with MAPS, the idea was to build some low-water dams and impound the water, and maybe it would lead to some development. But even if it didn't lead to development, at least we would have water in our river. The mayor also placed all 9 projects on one ballot. And this proved to be a winning formula because it forced the people that had different priorities to work together. So suddenly, the people that were passionate about the arts were working side by side with the people that supported the sports facilities and those that were pushing the water projects and the library. You had all of these different interest groups suddenly working together. You suddenly had a lot of people pulling on the same rope. And so with all of these projects together on one ballot, the city council calls for an election, 9 projects, 5-year penny-on-the-dollar sales tax to pay for it. And it was a really tough election. In the final days, knowing it was going to be close, the mayor and council had defended their plan over and over again, and finally Mayor Norick went down to the basics. He looked the citizens in the eye and said, look, this is what it breaks down to. Even if no one ever creates a job because of MAPS, and even if no one ever moves to Oklahoma City because of MAPS, the worst case scenario is we have a better city for us. We'll have a better city for our kids and our grandkids. Election day comes, December 14th, 1993. The early results are not favorable, but before the night ended, MAPS had passed. Just barely, 53% of the vote. Interesting today, though, you can't hardly find anyone who will admit they voted against it. But there was more controversy ahead. The months after Election Day were seemingly just as tough as the months before. The city had overpromised how quickly the projects could be built. You know, the pay-as-you-go formula, the money had to be collected before it could be spent, and deadlines were missed. The estimated costs were exceeded. Go ahead another 16 months after that MAPS election, and MAPS was probably more controversial than it had ever been. And then at this tumultuous time in our city's history, we were struck with the largest act of domestic terrorism in United States history. At 9:02 on a weekday morning, a truck loaded with explosives parks on the street just a few blocks from here, and the ensuing blast kills 168 people. So, take a snapshot in time of this generation. They had endured the economic collapse of the 1980s that had crippled the economy. They had rallied behind the promise of MAPS, but in the spring of 1995, all MAPS had to show for itself was a series of controversies. And now, the city had to deal with the emotional turmoil of a mass murder. 168 of us gone. Our friends, our neighbors, our co-workers, taken from us and their families in an instant. I remember that Sunday going to church, and I remember feeling a little helpless and a little hopeless. And I remember the sermon. Our pastor, Marty Grubbs, was reflecting on the event, as you would expect. And he said, I know it seems really hard to imagine because of all we're dealing with. But I really believe, he said, that something good is going to come out of all this. And I remember how hollow that sounded. I remember how his words seemed absurdly optimistic. Because you remember, this was just a few days after the bombing. We didn't yet know how many people had been killed. Our police and firefighters were still sifting through tons of debris looking for bodies. A lot of people weren't yet counted dead. They were just missing. And every day the death toll got larger and larger. And every day the toll in our collective spirit seemed to grow. And yet my pastor had the foresight and the wisdom to see some light at the end of the tunnel. But looking back, I believe something positive did take place in the months after the bombing. As we recovered from that darkest moment, it was as if the city and the citizens came together, and we grabbed hands, and we pulled each other up, and we said, no one is going to separate us again. We've been through too much. And over the next few years, as the city rebuilt, the people of this city came together. And by 1998, when that first MAPS project opened, the ballpark, there was a sense of pride and unity and the beginning of a momentum that still exists today, some 16 years later. In 1998, Kirk Humphreys becomes mayor, and he sees that although the MAPS projects are important for inner city development, the city as a whole is not going to move forward unless we do something about the crumbling physical nature of that inner city school district. Through the years, the school district had not been able to pass the needed bond issues, and the deferred maintenance was piling up. There was no easy solution. In fact, it couldn't have been more complicated. We had 24 school districts serving kids that live in Oklahoma City. But Humphreys worked at consensus building and bringing the entire community together to face this problem head on. In the end, he got 24 school boards to agree to one funding plan. Can you imagine getting 24 school boards to agree to anything? Technically, it wasn't the city government's responsibility to deal with the school's problems, but it had developed into an emergency situation that required a solution. The mayor and the business community got together. They came up with Maps for Kids, which is a somewhat complicated but brilliant solution to the capital needs of our schools. Today, we know it as a physical investment in over 70 neighborhoods, brand new schools, refurbished schools, spurring new development in pockets of the city that have not seen new development in decades. Over $500 million was spent on that inner city district. Nearly $150 million was spent in the suburban districts. So Oklahoma City kids that lived in the Putnam City district or Moore or Yukon or Edmond, 24 districts in all, everyone benefited. Inside the schools, as we know, there is work to be done. Our successes in the classroom have been erratic. One neighborhood school succeeds, another one doesn't. That's an unacceptable proposition. But who hasn't sensed the recent optimism from the teachers to the superintendents? And I know Dave Lopez, our interim superintendent of the Oklahoma City Public School System, is in the audience today. You can sense exciting things are happening. There's more emphasis on reading and math. More members of our community are now willing to get involved as tutors. Maps for Kids, although we may not have known it in 1998, was really the beginning of this community putting its arms around its children and pledging to do better. And that only happens when a community comes together. It only happens in a city that has a lot of people pulling on the same rope. As the MAPS projects opened, the Maps for Kids schools were completed. Wasn't too long after that our economy responded. 30 years ago, we were an economic embarrassment. Outside investors were willing to put their money almost any place but here. Today, new construction takes place in neighborhoods north and south and east and west. And as national banks look across the country for places to invest their money, they like to invest it here. And that means jobs. In the past year, one major accomplishment of our economic development team stands to be noticed. We landed the General Electric Global Research Facility. GE is a $275 billion company. They have options. They can invest in any city in the world. They can be choosy. And they chose us. Our strong economy is helping out in lots of other ways too. Our city's efforts to address our homeless continues to show signs of success. Through faith-based organizations, philanthropy, and countless hours of work by social service professionals and volunteers spending their time, the number of homeless in Oklahoma City has decreased every year since 2008. Food distribution is a big issue in our city these days. How do we address hunger and obesity at the same time? How do we make sure that everyone in our city has access to fresh fruits and vegetables? Our local food bank is doing a wonderful job helping us to distribute to people in need. And again, they had a record year. Our giving to the arts is also up. The Allied Arts, which helps fund so many arts organizations in our community, has broken its fundraising record for a second straight year. And in a digital age, our libraries are remaining vibrant centers of activities. And I hope we have a picture of this. I wanted you to see this. This is new this year, new to me anyway. It's children reading to dogs. Didn't see that one coming. And perhaps the dogs are hearing about our continued success in our public-private partnership with the Humane Society. The Humane Society, founded here in 2007, they work closely with our animal shelter. They have found homes for 13,000 cats and dogs. . They have spayed and neutered 57,000 animals. We're taking advantage of our economy in some other ways too. We are spending more money on street resurfacing than ever before. We have added police officer positions to our force in each of the last 2 years. I anticipate we'll be doing that again this year. And it's probably not a coincidence we have reduced crime this past year, 8 to 10%. The number of drive-by shootings, half what it used to be. Through our truancy program and our police athletic league, our police officers are interacting with kids earlier rather than later. And yesterday, you should be proud, we broke ground on a brand new police station to replace the building that has served us for the last 60 years. Thanks to your yes votes in our bond issues, we are building new fire stations. We are repairing bridges. We're improving parks. We're addressing our drainage needs. We're replacing buses. We're building and updating new libraries. When you put more money into streets and police and schools, you are building stronger neighborhoods. We have seen in the last 20 years, though, how a growing economy is necessary if we're going to invest in the needs of what is an extremely large city. 620 square miles. There's no question that during those tough economic times of the 80s and into the 90s, we allowed deferred maintenance to creep into our system. My mother has lived in the same house for the past 50 years. And when I was growing up in that house, I remember my mother impressing upon me the importance of investing in our home on a continual basis. She was a school teacher. She taught first grade. She had summers off. And every year she would have a project to improve our home. One year it would be new drapes. The next year it would be new carpet. If times were tough, she would just buy some cans of paint and we would paint the hallways and bedrooms. But she insisted that you had to keep updating your home or you would get behind on the maintenance. And it seems to me that's what happened to Oklahoma City in the 80s and 90s. The economy was so bad, we were just trying to hang on. We were just trying not to lay off police officers and firefighters. We were just trying to make ends meet in a sinking economy. So we didn't adequately invest in our streets and our parks. Through the years, it got better, and at some point, fairly recently, we turned the corner. Now we're adding police officers, and we're spending more than ever before in our streets trying to catch up. But the only reason that we have the resources to do it is that we have built one of the strongest economies in the country. And our economy, which I think is best symbolized by the revitalization of our downtown, is providing the money that we now use to invest in our neighborhoods. So, taking all this into consideration, what has this generation accomplished? Well, with the MAPS projects, we have made incredible investments in our infrastructure. Our commitment to the arts is gaining national attention. And just as previous generations of Oklahomans were hardworking and entrepreneurial, this generation is creating more jobs than ever before. Over the last 4 years, you have built an economy that has created the lowest unemployment in the United States. You have created the highest per capita growth rate of any city in the nation. When I first ran for mayor, I described this city as a faith-based community that works hard and dreams big. And I still believe that's true today. But who amongst us hasn't seen this renaissance and wondered if it's going to be true tomorrow? 130 years ago, this city was built on a prairie. It rose from nothing but a river, a railroad, and fertile land. The settlers created a faith-based community that worked hard and dreamed big. And it wasn't just that generation. You want to hear about hard times. When this event is over, come up and talk to my mother. She will tell you about the 1930s. Now, what happened last week might be a little unclear, but she can tell you about the 1930s. That generation never gave up. Our economy was really bad in the 1980s. We didn't give up. 19 years ago, this city arose from the largest act of domestic terrorism in United States history. The people of this city are unique. Maybe Rome was not built in a day, but always remember that we were. Maybe the phoenix arose from the ashes, but 19 years ago, we did too. That bombing broke our hearts, but not our resolve. And today we have an incredible memorial dedicated to those who lost their lives from it. We grew from that event. We came together in a way that perhaps no other American city ever has. And since then, that unity has been our city's secret ingredient. These days, city leaders come from all over the country to visit your city, Oklahoma City. They want to see for themselves the renaissance that you have created. When they're here, sometimes I get to speak to them. You can imagine we have kind of a well-rehearsed script for them. We show them what we think they need to see, and we let them talk to who we think they need to talk to, and hopefully I get a chance to speak to them before they get on the bus and go back to the airport. But after I've finished talking to them and answered their questions and I see them leave the room, I think to myself, yes, they have come to Oklahoma City, and there's no question they will take an idea or two back with them. But the one thing they cannot extract from us is the unity that this city has created for itself. It's almost a certainty they don't have it. We have more people pulling on the same rope than they do. But is that going to be true tomorrow? Is it going to be true next year, 5 years from now? I believe it can be. But we have to remember how we got here. It's been 19 years since the bombing. Half the people that live in this city did not live here then. If we don't remember how we got here, we'll eventually turn on each other. That unity that helped us come together and pass maps, and Maps for Kids and Maps 3, that's not a given. That unity exists because of the life experiences of going through those hard times in the 80s and the emotional struggles of the 90s. We don't have to agree on every issue. We know we won't. But we do need to agree that the best interests of the city come first. And building a city is school by school and neighborhood by neighborhood. Let me close today with a short story. A couple of weeks ago, I was speaking at a neighborhood association meeting in southeast Oklahoma City. It was in the Highland Park neighborhood at the Highland Park Elementary School, which is near Southeast 53rd and Sunny Lane. And after I spoke, a young girl from the neighborhood came up to me and asked if she could take a picture, and then she handed me a paper she said she had done for her 5th grade class, and a couple of other people handed me things to read, and I took them all with me, and I got home a couple hours later, and I read the little girl's paper, and I brought it with me today. It's called Why I Love My Neighborhood. by Malaya McMillan. She writes, "I love my neighborhood because in autumn, I like to get all the leaves in my yard and put them in a big pile and run into them. Sometimes I would bury myself in leaves, and when I am all covered, I pop out of the pile. Also in autumn, it's basketball season. The reason I like it when it's basketball season is because I get to play for my school, which is in my neighborhood. My neighborhood is nice because the people are nice. Everyone is always saying hi to each other or waving. Also, the way that it's nice is because people keep their yards clean. Some people even have a little flower garden in their front yard. Another thing I like about my neighborhood is all the trees. The trees are very big and really pretty. Almost every yard has a tree or a bush in it. And now that it's fall, there are leaves to crunch in. Some trees are big, some trees are small, but all are very beautiful. And the final thing that I love about my neighborhood is my family. Both of my grandmas live in my neighborhood. I love it when I go to my grandma's house. Every morning, my grandma takes my sister to school, and every afternoon, she picks my sister and I up from school. And those are all the things that I love about my neighborhood." She seems like a very happy girl, and when you break down the reasons that she loves her neighborhood, it comes down to family and neighbors and schools and trees. It's not all that complicated. And I asked her to be with us today. Malaya is here with their parents, Darren and Sharon McMillan, and their neighborhood association president, Stan Konopinski. Would you all please stand so we can show our appreciation for you coming down today? And Malaya, I hope you got an A on your paper. We need to get her back to school, obviously, and I want to thank them for coming and thank all of you for coming. Don't ever think twice about this. You are building an incredible place to live, and the best is yet to come. Hope to see you next year. Thank you.